Yo, what is up everyone? Back here with another video. In today's video, we are going to be breaking down how I played in 3 tournaments over 1 weekend. So pretty much what I'm going to be doing with this video is just talking to you guys through my entire thought process, how I did, which I did pretty well, I think, between all 3. Actually, I'm going to be talking about 4. I snuck a bonus one in there, but I'll kind of explain it to you guys. And also, just going to be kind of talking through how you kind of go through a team process and kind of develop a team as time goes. So without further ado, let's get into it. So pretty much when we look at my first version of the team that I'm going to be going over. So I played the Limitless tournament. It was a $1,000 Series 1 tournament. And essentially this tournament was like the first big tournament of the Scarlet and Violet metagame. So for me, what was really important was having a team that I felt allowed me to control the pace of the game. It was consistent enough into metagame, which realistically not much of us knew what it was going to be, right? So pretty much what I ended up kind of picking in the end was a Skeleturge team. So why Skeleturge? So basically what I had kind of understood from the metagame and by this point was that a couple of things were big threats, right? So essentially one of the big threats was Goldango, which I was prepared for with Garchomp, right? And then also having ways to deal with Indeedee and Armor's size spam, and also having ways to just deal with stuff like Dondozo, right? So what I was pretty much really focused on with this team, even more so than like Goldango at this point, because Goldango wasn't like super meta defining yet, was really important to me was Dondozo Tatsugiri, right? Because I didn't really want to lose to a gimmick team. And on top of that, I had also kind of had other options there to just be safe into a majority of teams, right? So the team I had settled on was Rotom Wash, Garchomp, Garganacl, Grimmsnarl, Hydreigon, and Skeleturge. Now, when I put this team together, it was, you have to remember too, this is essentially into a metagame that I did not know too well. So obviously it would probably look different if I had that context going into it. But essentially what I decided on was I wanted a Specs Rotom so I could output a lot of damage from the special side with Thunderbolt, Hydro Pump, Volt Switch, Terra Blast. Terrafire, Terra Blast also gave me really good options in the grass types that were otherwise annoying. Garchomp gave me access to, you know, a really strong physical attacker, and Clear Amulet prevented me from getting attack drops, and I put Swords Dance on there because I felt like I wanted to be able to boost commonly. I ended up finding out Swords Dance really wasn't that great, but, you know, that kind of gave me some ideas going in next tournament. Then Garganacl. Garganacl felt really important on the team to me at first because I felt like it would be my best way to deal with like a lot of other teams in terms of like being able to stall them out. It really only came to one match. It wasn't too important for the team. It didn't really feel like the best part of the team. Then Grimmsnarl. So Grimmsnarl used a set of Spirit Break, Light Screen, Reflect, and Taunt. This set I think was almost perfect for like what the team needed, except that in hindsight probably Babbery would have been better. But for this tournament, like Clay ended up being fine because realistically no one was not as many people were using Goldango, right? Then we have Hydreigon. So Hydreigon was Assault Vest with the ability Levitate, obviously, and then Terra-type Steel. And I was running Snarl, Flash Cannon, Draco Meteor, Dark Pulse. I was using this Hydreigon more defensively, so it made a lot of sense on this team to have this Hydreigon run this set. And also, I just wanted something that could kind of sit in front of Size Spam really comfortably, and even in front of Torkoal. So it ended up being really good for its role. Then finally, Skeleturge. I ended up settling on Citrus Berry over Leftovers, and I also went Terra-type Grass instead of the normal Terra-type Fairy, because I wanted something that could pretty much immediately, like, pair next to my Garchomp and I could Earthquake next to, as well as also just beating opposing, like, Garchomp and the other teams when you're Grass type. Like, a lot of teams don't expect it, and you can kind of take advantage of them and exploit them with the Grass type. And then we have the set of Torch Song, Shadow Ball, Slack Off, Protect. Skeleturge at this point we're running a lot of Will-O-Wisp, but I did not feel really good about Will-O-Wisp, so I put Protect on instead. So that was the team, and after the tournament, I made a couple of discoveries, and this is really important. So when you're working on a team, you have to kind of keep track of like what you're bringing, what you're not bringing, how often something's useful, etc. So I found out that my 2 least used slots were Garganacl and Rotom Wash. So what that pretty much told me was that my main team was focused around Garchomp, Hydreigon, Grimmsnarl, and Skeleturge. Now, there were a couple weaknesses with the team that got exploited, which I didn't particularly like. First off, Garchomp without Dragon Claw felt really bad into opposing Garchomp, and I felt like I wanted more options to remove them. And essentially, I was like, okay, like, I don't need Sword Dance. Sword Dance never came into play. Like, I never clicked it ever. And I was like, I also want more damage output since there's, like, not much Intimidate in the tournament, right? So I added Dragon Claw over Sword Dance, and I gave it a Life Orb. And then I changed Grim to Babbery Berry because with Babbery Berry, it actually let me sit in front of Goldango and I could bring it into the matchup. So then going in, I worked on the team more, and going into the next tournament, the Nino Pokebros tournament, I made some adjustments to the team. I ended up getting top 4 here. Now, I ended up adding King Gambit. Now, I had used King Gambit on a previous team before we actually knew the rules for Series 1 in a format that really allowed like all of the Paradox Pokemon and everything else. And I really liked it. So I was like, this actually makes a lot of sense into Goldango teams because with Babbery Grimmsnarl, I can just click Light Screen and Koto Cleave into the opposing Goldango Murkrow lead and just absolutely body them, right? And then I also have Reflect as well, which pairs really well with the weakness policy. And I ended up picking Terra-type Fire because what that allowed me to do is it allowed me to wall Sylveon really hard, which is something that actually gives a lot of this team trouble besides the Skeleturge. And also, it prevents me from getting burned, which is really nice. And I have Taunt to shut down Amoonguss anyways, right? So that's kind of what I ended up settling with. And I just ended up using, Iron Head, Koto Cleave, Sucker Punch. And also, Terra-type Fire let me bring into Torkoal matchups, which I felt like was very important for me. So it ended up just being really good. The King Gambit choice was definitely like really, really solid on this team. And then you'll see my Chomp. I made the changes I talked about. I ran Terra Fairy. Terra Fairy was not really the play going into this tournament, to be quite honest with you. It felt really, really mid. I just kind of like looked at it and I was like, bruh, like, it just never did anything. Like I never Terra Fairied, so I didn't find it to be useful. Although I didn't really like think that I would have missed Terra Ground because I never would have used it in all my situations. So I was playing around with the Garchomp Terra type because I really didn't feel like I needed the ground Terra type on the Garchomp because I was never using it. As well too, Terra type Fairy was to wall Hydreigon and opposing Chomp, but then I was just like, okay, but this doesn't really make sense because then I'm losing the Goldango, which like I already want to make sure my team beats, which like my team had enough for it. It was just like why not have a type that like gives me a good matchup in the Goldango and other stuff running around, right? So that was the logic. Grimmsnarl stayed the same, just added a Babbery Berry for Goldango. Then Hydreigon ended up Hydreigon ended up running a Terra Steel type again. Assault Vest, same set. I didn't really change too much there. Now the new partner besides King Gambit to the team was actually Mousehold. So why did I add Mousehold? Essentially what I wanted with Mousehold was like a strong physical attacker besides Chomp that could actually pressure the opposing team. And like, while the concept seemed strong on paper, it actually wasn't that relevant for most of the tournament. So the first time I brought Mousehold, it just got like KO'd immediately. And that was because I was playing a speed tie with another Mousehold. Like I just lost my Mousehold turn 1. And then the second time I brought it, which was the second set I brought it really, which was versus Nate, the eventual champion of this tournament, it was actually really good. I just ended up whiffing a KO on like the Abomasnow by like 1 HP, and that's actually how I didn't make finals. But it felt like okay in that matchup. But the thing is like if you're only bringing Mousehold to 2 of like, what was that? Yeah, 2 of your 12 games. That means you're not bringing it to like 10 sets essentially. So it just wasn't really like worth it. You know what I mean? Like I want something I can bring into more matchups. So it didn't feel particularly strong there. And then finally Skeleturge. Skeleturge remained the same, except I tried leftovers on it. I ended up finding out I really didn't like leftovers that much. I actually would have preferred citrus berries in like all my situations. So then what I did was I was like, okay, so I'm going to adjust this team again going into Victory Road and going into the Wide League tournament. So the Wide League tournament, unfortunately, doesn't have an open sheet. It was closed sheet, so I can't really give any like data on like what the tournament had running in it. All I know is like my run itself. It's linked in our tournament Discord, or like in our Discord where we have the tournament section. But what I'm going to do is go through the version I brought to Victory Road. So Victory Road, I did cut, but I didn't actually like win my first round. So I just got knocked out in round of 64. So to me, like I was a little disappointed with that, but also too, like it's Pokemon, you know what I mean? I played a really rough matchup. Like this team had a lot of trouble with like grass type Azu. So like that was actually giving me like huge issues. But essentially, what felt really strong about the team I ended up keeping. So like King Gambit felt really good, Garchomp felt really good, and Hydreigon, Grimmsnarl felt really good. I ended up adding Sylveon over Mousehold, which did end up coming more than Mousehold, so it was the correct choice, right? In terms of like continuing the work on the slot. Like it was a natural progression of the team. However, I don't feel like it was like the number one, like this is the correct choice. And like this team is still a work in progress. Like I'm sure I'm going to work on it more like going into future events if I continue to use it. So, this is just kind of giving you guys an idea of like how I went through my thought process with it. And, it was useful. It was good for dispatching Murkrows. It was really good into the Hydreigon Garchomp Murkrow core. And like you could exploit it as long as you got rid of the Goldango. So it felt really strong and I actually really liked it. And then Skeleturge remained the same. Again, Skeleturge was probably the only thing on this team that really hasn't changed that much at all, along with Hydreigon. Those two have felt consistently strong no matter like what situation I put them in. So I have had no reason to change them pretty much. Now, what does this mean overall for the team itself? Because like you guys can see the natural progression. Like, why did I make these choices for Victory Road? Essentially, the reason why I changed to Sylveon was just Mousehole didn't get much use, and I wanted something to break down opposing dragon cores easier than like having to use my own dragons, right? And this is something that kind of allowed me to do that. And what I recognized after this tournament is that I kind of needed like something that was a little bit more supportive maybe in that slot, or something that like just had better defensive synergy, because I did still find that like well-played Goldingo on bulkier teams was a lot of trouble for me, right? And like even though I have a Hydreigon and a King Gambit, like basically it was a Rotom Heat with Will-O-Wisp and Goldingo, and it was a lot of trouble for my team to deal with. And they had a Azumarill and Maushold. So like that was actually really tough for my team to break down, and something that I was like, okay, I want to consider this going into like future tournaments as well, right? So it just kind of gave me some good ideas there. As well, this team could sometimes struggle with fire type Annihilate because I don't have King Gambit to really beat it. Garchomp, like it can Earthquake it, but they don't have to Terrestrialize in front of you. Hydreigon, you can chunk it, but because I'm not Life Orb, I'm not chunking as much as I want. Realistically, I was forced to rely on Skeleturge pretty much, or just hitting the Annihilate before it could Terrestrialize with Sylveon. And like that's not always the best, right? So Rage Fist is really scary. It felt like a big weakness of this team, so that's definitely going to factor into whatever next adjustment I make for this team. And then finally, I played the Wide League tournament. The Wide League tournament, I ended up going, I believe, 6-2. And what was crazy about this team, by the way, and the reason why I think this team's so good, so I played 2 tournaments at once, essentially. So Victory Road, I played starting at, I believe, 9 a.m. or no, 8 a.m. 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. And I end up getting so I go to 3-2 pretty quickly, which is like basically your life is on the line. I win 3 matches in a row, so I'm 6-2. I need to win my next match to make top cut the next day. But the other tournament I'd signed up for already started. So now I'm having to play 2 rounds at once, essentially, right? Between Victory Road and the Wide League tournament. And I realize while playing the Wide League tournament on my second cart, because I have a second cart with like Violet, I end up realizing I don't have the Terror Orb because I'm using a rental code of like my team from Scarlet, right? But I don't have the Terror Orb yet in Violet. I had to like rush through it to get the cart like while I was streaming the tournament like earlier. And luckily my girlfriend Sierra helped me as well get through it, but like we didn't get to the point where the Terror Orb was there. So essentially, I'm playing without Terrestrialization in round 1 and round 2 of Wide League, and I have to play round 1 of Wide League and winning in a Victory Road at the same time. So literally, if you guys saw the stream, I was jumping between like playing on like the stream game, like with the one I had on the screen, turning around to the bed because my other Switch was charging, putting in my inputs there, and flipping back around. And like it was the craziest thing I've ever done. I don't know how I managed to beat both opponents. I cut Victory Road. Then I ended up winning the first 2 rounds of Wide League without Terrestrialization because I had to play those 2 without the Terror Orb. And then finally I got the Terror Orb and I was able to play. I was able to play as intended with Terrestrialization. So it ended up working out, you know. I was very proud. It felt like the team was really good. The fact that I was able to win even without Terrestrialization. And, you know, it made me feel good about my own skills a little bit. But yeah, so like what are the big takeaways, right? So like I essentially talked about the whole run. I talked about the team. You know, the EVs and everything will be up on Patreon. I always leave my tournament teams up there. But essentially, what is like the takeaway? Like, how did I really go through a process? You guys can kind of see like how I made my adaptations to the metagame as they went. But like, what did I learn from all this? So essentially, even though I did the worst in Victory Road, I ended up getting a top 16 in Wide League. So I felt like pretty good about the team overall. I did get a little bit unlucky too. So like, it also kind of factored into like me being like, yeah, I'm not going to win like every tournament. You know, like that's just reality. But I want to, obviously. But pretty much like what I took away was like, okay, now I understand like what makes screens fundamentally strong. It's strong bulk, strong defensive pivoting, strong endgame options with like Skeleturge, for example, and being able to control the momentum of your opponent's team. And essentially, you can literally just see that process of testing out different slots, trial and error, understanding what works and doesn't work. Garganical was too passive. Rotom didn't really fit exactly for what I wanted on the team at that point, right? Then I looked over here and I was like, King Gambit helps me do a Goldango stuff. I adapted to the Goldango meta with the Grimmsnarl. I wanted my Garchomp to do more damage. I added a Mausehole to try and be more annoying with redirection and population bomb. I realized that mouse hold wasn't coming to too many matches. I made adaptations here. By the way, I forgot to mention this. My Garchomp is Terra Water, and the reason why is because it is neutral into Dragon Fairy moves, and as well it like resists Ice and like pretty much just a bunch of useful types. Ice and like its neutral Fairy. It just felt like a good type, and it actually ended up really mattering in the Goldango, so it was a good type choice. But anyways, and it helped versus Rain. But pretty much what I ended up doing here was I was like, okay, so the previous tournaments I had a slot like mouse hold that just felt like it was supportive, but it wasn't like, it was supportive and it could do damage, but it wasn't too like relevant enough where I could bring it into a lot of teams. So Sylveon was the next ad to output a lot more damage with this team, and like that was really strong because it did the same thing as Mousehold did in terms of pressuring a lot of damage, but it did it a lot better and like in the way I needed it to, because I had 2 strong physical attackers and 1 really strong special attacker realistically. So having another strong special attacker was really nice for this team. And then as well too, you know, I kind of made the adaptation to the Terra type, understanding that like Fairy wasn't that useful. So you can kind of see the thought process, and this is something that's really important as you're progressing through a meta, to understand like what things work and don't work, and kind of build up more ideas for the teams, right? So hopefully you guys enjoyed this kind of video. Hopefully this was informative for you guys and kind of how my thought process went, how the tournament weekend went, and everything. And as always, guys, I incredibly appreciate the support. I think that these kind of videos that I do, I really try to make them as informative as possible so you guys can get into like my brain in terms of how I view the tournament. So thank you for watching. As always, make sure to check out Patreon, coaching, all the links down below if you guys would like to support me. And I'll see you guys next video. Peace.